So yeah, this meeting, I'm going to talk about LES. I think hopefully the mic is, yeah, I think the mic is picking up fine. I'll just mono it out later. So yeah, so LES is, I'll just show you the site. So it's the Live Enhancement Suite. So it's basically just a bunch of people who use Ableton. If you guys know artists like Direct and Inverted Silence, I think Inverted Silence was on Night Owl Collective, if you know them. But they just got together, made just essentially just a host of shortcuts and kind of workflow improvements for Live. And they made it earlier, and it was like Windows only, and just now they made it for Mac, and then they also added like new stuff for both. So you can just go to like enhancementsuite.me. I'll post all these links also like by the end of the meeting, and you could just install it for either Mac or Windows. Pretty easy installation. I would suggest going through LES 1.2. Yeah, this guy. I think he was one of the chief architects of LES, and he goes through a pretty straightforward like installation of LES for Mac. Or there's like an older video where he just talks about the original version of LES. So I would highly recommend that if you're wondering like how do I install this? Like what does it do? Like how do I have it on startup like all the time? So all those kind of questions could be answered in this video, or these two videos depending on which platform you use. I guess the purpose of this like meeting is just to show some of the basic features and kind of like how they work and how I personally customize them, and kind of like some not like words of warning, but stuff I tried and then like quickly kind of got out of hand and didn't really go anywhere. So let me just jump right in. So when you have it installed, you'll usually have like just a little icon or just a little thing at the bottom that says like LES is working. And here there's like a little drop down. Oh, one actually just really quick thing that it does is it finally gives you a way to track your project time, like how much time you spend on a given project. And so there's two modes. There's strict time and then there's project time. So strict time is only when you have like the Ableton window open and you're like using it. I think project time is like, just all the time you have Ableton open at all, right? So you could like go on YouTube and like look for a tutorial, but like you still have Ableton open, like it'll count that time. So it's just whatever you want. And I actually haven't checked the time. I actually have never checked the time, to be honest. But I don't know actually where to find it. I usually just don't check the time for my projects all that much, but maybe it's in here. Anyway, but yeah, just know that that's there. That's kind of a nifty feature. I like that about other DAWs. Like, you could say, I mean, it was a little bit of an ego boost because you could be like, oh, I spent X hours on like this project. But yeah, so the three, I guess, things that I would want to talk about. Also, this is kind of a random project, so I mean, I could release stems for this, but I just pulled it up as a means to, like, just as an example. The few things that I did want to talk about were it has this feature where you have this double right click feature. So if you open up a new MIDI track, for example, it says drop an instrument or sample here. So usually you would go to instruments and you would look and you'd be like, okay, I want a drum rack, so I'm just going to drag it down here and then boom. What LES allows you to do is if you double right click, so on Windows, I mean, you just have a right click button, you double right click. Some computers you don't, and so it might be like function and then double click, or like two fingers and double right click. So whatever right clicking usually is, it opens up this little menu, and you could basically just add instruments directly from there. And the way it does it is it basically searches it, selects it, and then adds it to your instrument track, right? So and the cool thing about it is that you can customize it to whatever you want. So I think it starts out. I actually kind of forgot what the default was, but I think it just starts out as like instruments, effects, MIDI pitch, and obviously like this README. And an important thing to note is it's always the top result of what you have. So like if I do this again for a drum rack, for example, you could see it searches it and then selects the first one and then drags that down. So it's really important that you name them precisely. Um, that's why, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you have two things that sound very similar, there's ways to specify it a little bit more. And kind of the way you specify it is if you go in this configure menu. And so from everything kind of below these equal signs is where you add your instruments. And so you can have like a folder, and then with the most recent update, it allowed you to have subfolders. So for example, I have so the / and then / is just a subfolder. So there's this main folder effects, and then there's a subfolder compressors, right? And so if I go on here, right, I see effects, I see compressors, and then I have the 3 compressors that I usually use. And it doesn't. And the cool thing about it is it doesn't have to be stock Ableton stuff because it's using this kind of universal search feature. So for example, I have Julian here, which is like a third-party metering plugin. And so I can open up that no problem because it has a very unique name. Or I have Punchbox, for example. Punchbox takes a while to load. I think it's because there's an audio unit and like a VST. Or maybe it's just Punchbox's. I don't know. They spend like way too much time on these like gritty kind of like GUI things where it's like supposed to be like a very rustic looking pedal or something.
Kind of like an emulator, right?
Yeah, I mean
it is an emulator, but like
it is an emulator to an extent, but like a lot of it, I mean, this is just like a sampler, right? Like this, it just picks a sample, or like this 909. I mean, it's basically just like a very simple additive synth with like some envelopes and whatnot. But you know, you do you, Punchbox. Another kind of like small feature that they add is the ability to close plugin windows. So if you guys have ever like used Ableton and had a bunch of things open, it's like you usually have to go up to the top left or top right and just kind of click out of each thing. Now you can do Control W or Command W to just close it, which is pretty handy. Also, like Control Alt W will just close them all. Similar to how on like if you use Chrome or something, you're trying to like close a window but not close the browser. Same thing. So yeah, I'll share what I made for my like I don't know things that I put in. Yeah, I kept it very simple because when I first got this, I was like trying to add everything, right? What my vision was oh, okay, everything in instruments, I want to put like every one of those things in here. But the whole advantage of this double right click is that it speeds up your process. And so if you're spending time still like scanning through those things that you added that you don't perhaps use that frequently, it's like, I mean, just as much as like a waste of time. So I would recommend definitely like keeping it more minimal than anything. Like for the effects, I added like quite a few effects, but I definitely didn't add the whole, gamut of effects. Like, I didn't add like spectrum and corpus and like vinyl distortion because like, frankly, I just don't use those things as much. And I added EQ8 but not EQ3 for like obvious reasons. I mean, like I don't know that many people that use EQ3. And then also Ableton released like channel EQ, which is like kind of just a slightly modified version of EQ3. But so I don't know. But yeah, so and the video does a pretty good job of explaining this, but the reason there's kind of two names here is one is what it's called in your menu. So like one is what you appear when you double right click, and then the one below is the actual search term that is used. And one other specifier that is used, for example, is a VST. Right, so you can put the name and then like in quotations VST just to demarcate that, oh, it's like a VST that I want. Maybe I have a sample that's also called Julian, and I don't want it to select that because that might be like the highest search result because maybe it like prioritizes audio or something. So you could specify it as VST. I think that's the only specifier as of now.
So you could probably search for samples too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you have specific samples, I think the main advantage of this is, well, actually, I mean, DSKick isn't really a sample, but it's just one of the Max for Live like instrument things. One other thing I like to do is, so I have this drive inverted output that I really like to use. it's like stupidly. I don't know. It's a little like almost silly how simple it is, but it's basically just one macro that correspondingly reduces the output of saturator compared to the drive. So you're keeping you're trying to keep the amplitude constant essentially, and only affect the like way that saturator adds harmonics. So I personally find that kind of useful. Um, but yeah, and also just because like this area is kind of small, you can already kind of tell that like if you start adding stuff, it's just gonna add to the bottom. So eventually, like if you just add too many things here, you're gonna run out of space. So the subfolders thing is definitely like a much needed welcome. Um, but yeah, so any questions on that? No? Okay. Not really. Okay. Yeah, and feel free to interrupt me if you guys have questions, like because sometimes I think of questions just like randomly. Um, let's see what else.
Dude, the Control W is so nice.
Yeah, yeah. Actually,
Gosh.
I know on I don't know exactly what's the difference, but I don't know what the equivalent would be on Windows, but like I know Command Option P also closes it. But I think that's if you have the track selected. So like for example, like I closed it, but I can't open it unless I go back on the track. So maybe Command W is like a bit different. Well, I guess you could just do Z. Oh, actually, well, never mind. Control Z does not work. But yeah, so I guess there's two options to. I mean, I like Command W just because it's similar to like literally everything else, right? Like if you, I don't know, just opening up tabs in like any browser, it's like or closing tabs in any browser is just Control W. So yeah, what else do I want to talk about? One quick thing is, so normally when you do Control Shift W or Command Shift W on a MIDI clip, it loops it. So by default, this would usually be toggled on. So like for example, if I highlighted this area, right clicked, and then I and I did insert MIDI clip, by default Ableton loops it, meaning that if I drag this out, it'll just loop forever. So whatever you put in these 2 bars or 4 bars will just be repeated for these, and whatever you change to this will, like whatever change you make to this will happen for all of them. But LES changes that by basically just disabling that every time you make it. So now it doesn't loop, and so now you can just extend your clip, and so you can kind of see on the bottom how if I go from here to here, it's just making that clip 8 bars, and it's not just repeating those 4 bars like adjacently, which is pretty nice. Also, James just told me, and like I don't know why I didn't realize this earlier, but if you just double click, so it kind of depends on whatever the grid size is, but whatever grid size it is, if you double click, it'll create a MIDI clip, and so you can have looping enabled in that way. So if you really like looping, if you're like, hey, I like almost exclusively make MIDI clips to loop them, then this might be a better option. But the fact that now I can make them without looping, and I kind of have like the option to switch between those two is really cool. What else? Oh yeah, I was talking about the piano key. So normally drawing in piano roll is like kind of a pain in the ass. So right, there's like a draw. If you guys aren't familiar, there's kind of like an edit mode, and then there's like a draw mode, and you can switch between them by pressing B. So this little pencil icon means that I'm in draw mode. So draw mode is like, I can do this, but it's like a little annoying because you can't just like, when you make a note, you can't just like drag out the length or anything like that. It just goes based on the smallest grid size. So if I do this versus I do this, it makes like a different size note. And sometimes you just don't want that, right? Like you just want to be able to drag and kind of make notes as they come along. Or for making chords, you pretty much have to rely exclusively on hotkeys. So like what I did before was Control C, Control V, and then drag up, and then Control C, and do that kind of over and over. But what LES does is it makes a macro for just kind of the piano roll in general. And it kind of serves a couple of functions. So actually, I don't really use the other functions beyond this, and I kind of forgot what they were. But like the main thing I use it for is if you hold down tilde. So tilde is let me type it in somewhere. Tilde is this, or oops, this little like squiggly thing. You guys know what that is? The little like almost like approximately symbol or something like that. It's usually in the top left, kind of like below the escape key. If you hold that down and you're just in edit mode, so where you see this little cursor, you could just click and drag now and just make the note any length that you want. And then, you can just go above and be like, okay, I want to add a harmony here and then do this and then boom, boom. I mean, sometimes if you do it too quickly, it'll definitely just like shorten it. So like be a little, like it takes a little bit of practice. If you use a mouse, I imagine it'll be a lot easier than if you're using a trackpad. But yeah, so it requires you to stay at some length for a little bit of time. But it's still like extremely useful nonetheless, right? Like I literally never used draw mode because this was like just stupid. Like, I would be like, oh, I want to like make a piano like melody or something, and you're just like what is this? So big ups to LES on that one. If you hold Shift, so I think on Windows it's just a normal double right click, but on Mac it's if you hold down Shift and double right click, you can get all these scales and chords just at your fingertips. So for example, and I always mess this up, so forgive me if I have to do this a couple of times. But if let's say I'm like, oh man, I really want to use the Phrygian scale because like I went to that one pro meeting and like now I know what a Phrygian scale is and like I feel really cool and I want to flex on people. Then I could go in here and then shoot, I think I have to like, okay. So there's a little bit of delay on Mac. It's like a little awkward, so I don't use it all that often. But now you have the Phrygian scale just at your fingertips, and you can kind of move it up and down. You could like if you're someone who's like, man, like I don't really know all these other weird modes all that well, then what you could do is you could just kind of have like a filler MIDI clip, and I could create something here, and if I select them both, then now I have these kind of just as like ghost notes. So I could, I could make something in here with like whatever piano thing or like bass line thing that I want to make, and I can reference these notes kind of as I go and being like, oh, okay, well, so this note is, outside of Phrygian, so I don't want to use that, so maybe I'll go a half step down. So pretty useful for that kind of thing, because otherwise you would have to like go on Wikipedia, be like, okay, what is a Phrygian scale? And then you're like, okay, there's a flattened second, and what root do I want? Things like that. This just makes it a whole lot easier, especially if you want to just kind of dip your toes and explore some of these scales, and you're like, man, I don't like, I just don't know. Well, actually, I mean, these are all fairly simple. There's no like crazy chords here. But it's the scales I think are pretty cool. The fact that they have like harmonic minor, melodic minor, pentatonic based. Oh, interesting. Yeah. I know like shakuhachi is like pentatonic, or just a bunch of Japanese instruments are pentatonic. I don't know what world scales are. Gypsy. Whoa. Insen, Iwato. Wait, I want to know what these scales are.
Those are kind of used a lot in like Eastern European folk music. Kind of interesting to.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, what's the name of those scales? There's like a gypsy scale. There's like the Dorian scale. There's a couple. I don't know them off the top of my head, but like I feel like they're like pretty fun to play with if you have like a pizzicato kind of bell.
Oh, interesting. Good to know. I will actually explore some of these scales because I didn't even see all these ones down here, to be honest. Locrian, I mean, I don't know that many people that use Locrian other than maybe like a Jacob Collier or something. But yeah, I don't know. All these are pretty cool. So I guess the way it works on my computer is just I select it, and then if I hold down tilde and make a note, then it'll add everything on top. So yeah, just something to explore. Let's see, and then also if you, what's cool is that, oh shoot, I should probably plug in at some point. I might have to reduce the brightness a bit. You can actually disable any of these extra shortcuts. So let's say, for example, I'm like, hey, I want to loop. I want to be able to use Control Shift M or Command Shift M and have it loop like all the time. So I could just convert this to 0, and then when I save this file and kind of reload LES, you might have to reload Ableton. I've usually never had that problem. It's like pretty it's usually pretty good about it. Then you use that shortcut again and it won't work. And so like for example, there's also this shortcut that was do you guys know? So normally if you hit 0, it disables a clip. So it kind of that little thing in the middle that says clip deactivated. But then if I press it again, it'll reactivate it. And so LES added a shortcut where it basically, if you press 0 twice really quickly, you can delete a clip immediately. So I didn't find it all that useful because like sometimes I did it too slowly and then it just like deactivated, reactivated it, or like it reactivated and then deactivated again. And then I was also like, I mean, if I select a clip, I could just hit like backspace or delete and just delete it anyway. So I don't entirely know why it was like a lot of people wanted it or thought it would be useful. But for example, if I do this and then I reload LES, then so now there's no more clip. And the same thing here, if I just do it really quickly, then it's that. But then if I do it too slowly, then it still functions as it normally would. It's just that sometimes you're kind of like going through and maybe you're typing some settings and then you're accidentally like oh crap, I just deleted that clip. I mean you could just do Control Z or Command Z to go back, but I found myself just deleting it like a little too often because sometimes I would press 0 to like deactivate it and then I would like accidentally press it again, and so it just became like a little frustrating. So
another question. So you would press delete and like backspace. Would it do the same thing?
Exactly, yeah. So if I hit delete here,
Yeah.
it just deletes it. So I personally didn't like that shortcut, and I found myself to be like it became like a little frustrating. So I just ended up turning it off. So this last one, this Control Absolute Delete, I won't go into it, but because I ran into some problems on my computer, and I don't know if that's like a general bug or not a bug. So I think it's let me try it out here just to see if it kind of works. So normally if I so normally if I had something like this, so let's say this is like a 4-bar loop, and then I have this kind of extended over here. And let's say I want to duplicate this. Normally if I, let me just extend this a bit more. So normally if I duplicated this, it would kind of keep the gaps, right? It would duplicate whatever you wanted to duplicate here, but whatever was here would still be filling in those gaps. And so I guess the point, let me make sure I actually have it enabled. Okay, so I still have it enabled. And so presumably, if I had a clip here and I did, is Command Control D? It should see like it just doesn't work for me, and it just takes longer than regular duplicating. So I don't know. I messaged the developers about this, but they haven't gotten back to me. No, because I was like really looking forward to it because I was like, yo, like I actually would like to use this, and then I tried it out and I was like, this just doesn't work. Like, but yeah, that's there. I mean, if you guys have Windows and you try it out and you're like, this works fine, then like go for it. Let's see, what else is there? Oh yeah, there's also this really handy one. So I remember I think this is a pretty common feature. I mean, I remember when I was using FL, this was a thing, but usually if you did like Control Shift Save, it would like save a new copy, like of the same thing in the same like project folder and everything. And Ableton by default doesn't have that, so you have to kind of go in and then you could do save a copy, but there's no like immediate shortcut linked to it. So I think what you could do is it Control Shift Save? Maybe. Yeah. Maybe it's just Command.
It works for Windows though.
Yeah. Oh, the duplicate thing? Okay. Okay, so I'm just a schmuck. Like,
Nice.
Yeah, right. I want it like so badly. That's the thing. Shoot, actually, let me look at the shortcut again. So wait, new saver. Oh, oh, sorry, I was using the wrong. So if I do commit or Control Alt S, or conversely Command Option S on Mac. Wait, oh. So it'll automatically save a new version, and then if I, oh yeah, never mind, there it goes. And it'll automatically have the format of whatever the project was, underscore, and then the next number. So if I did this again, for example, it would go to 3, presumably. Yeah, so this would be the third one. And it's all saved within the same project folder. So if you're like, hey, I want to try out something, but I know this is going to like really change what the track is going to be like. I want to add a different intro or something. Then this would be super useful because you could just press a shortcut. It would automatically take you to the newer one. Because I think if you save a copy now, you would still have to save a copy and then open that new copy and make sure you don't go into the old one. And also the formatting is a bit different. I just like the name underscore something else rather than just having multiple different named ones where you're like, this is kind of more like this vibe or like this is kind of more that vibe. Like if you just have underscore, then it makes your life a little easier. I know Splice has this feature. Like every time you save it, it kind of saves a new version, so you can go back a version. But the fact that it's numbered and kind of on device, I think makes it a little better. Like, for example, if you're like on a plane or a train or something, you're trying to save multiple ones, like you don't want to rely on Splice to like retrieve all your copies of your project files. So that's like a pretty useful feature that I find myself using. There's
Wait, what does Control Shift Z do? I don't get it.
oh, so no, it's Control, I think Control Alt S.
No, I was talking about a different thing. Control Shift Z.
Oh, that's a redo. So
What's the difference?
so Control Z is undo.
Yeah.
So like for example, if I do this and then I hit, oops, let's do like delete, right? I delete this. I could do Control Z to undelete it, or I could do Command Shift Z to redo the deletion. So it's just a way to go forwards and backwards, kind of in your steps.
Like more to,
Yeah, exactly. Like you hold something else to redo. But yeah, I'm trying to think, what other cool settings are there? Oh yeah, I think if you do Alt L, you can add a marker. So if you guys use this for like arrangement view or something, so I can go here wherever my marker is, and then just whoops. Wait, did I do it there? Huh. Wait, I totally forgot what the shortcut was. Huh. Wait, can I just not add a marker there? Maybe it's okay. Wow, I don't know how I did that last one. I can't do that. Yeah, I think it's Alt L or